Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Calais Appeal webinar titled Tents and Bedding, Confiscations, Shortages and Solutions. Today's webinar will be focusing on tents, bedding and other forms of NFI in Calais. Today's speakers will be Victor Meyer from Utopia 56, Lena Denys from Refugee Women's Centre, and Clémence Sonet from La Capuche. These are three organisations in Calais providing tents, bedding, and other forms of clothing and other forms of NFI. And we'll be going into more details on that further in today's webinar. Just one thing I wanted to just mention before we get into today's webinar. The term NFI, this is going to be a term that many of you are familiar with. It means non-food items, and it's a phrase, a piece of jargon that we use very often in Calais. Effectively, when we say NFI, we mean tents, we mean sleeping bags, we mean blankets, we mean clothing, we mean shoes, things that keep people warm or give at least some degree of warmth and shelter in a situation like Calais. So to start off, I'm going to hand over to Clémence from La Capuche, who will be giving some context around Calais, and especially on why NFI is something so crucial here.
Yes, hi, thank you. So yes, hello, I'm Clémence and I'm from La Capuche. I'm going to tell you more about La Capuche later on. To give you a bit of context about the Calais situation. So there's on average roughly between 500 and 2,000 people on the move that are present at all times around the Calais area during the year. At the moment, we know that there is at the very least 1,000 people. That's a number that we have from distribution numbers. So that's the lowest number. Obviously, this number is probably higher considering the people who are also not accessing those services. Why are people stuck in Calais? Well, that's obviously because of the lack of safe routes to the UK. Calais being the closest point to the UK, people get to here and try very dangerous crossings to get to the UK, mostly via small boats. And this process can take weeks or even months for people to be successful. Victor from Utopia can tell you a little bit more about crossings later on. In the meantime, there are extremely limited accommodation possibilities for people. My colleagues will also tell you a little more about that later on. Therefore, tents and the bedding that we provide with tents is the only minimal shelter solution for most people that get stuck here. So why people need them, as I said, because there are extremely limited accommodation solutions that are provided by the state. And on top of that, there is a policy called the non-fixation point policy, which means that living sites are evicted on average every 48 hours. That's a policy that's been implemented since 2016, since the eviction of the big jungle, and that's been going on ever since. That means that every 48 hours, people's belongings are at risk of being seized, and that means a tent and bedding, obviously, but that means also every belonging, which means clothing items, which means phones, money, passport, etc. Those items are in theory seized and not stolen or thrown away. But in practice, we know that getting those items back, even though there is a process in place, is actually extremely difficult. And we'll also tell you a bit more about that later on. Which means that for tents and bedding specifically, these items need to be replaced when they have been seized. On top of that, another reason why there is such a high need for tent and bedding is that the material that we distribute is obviously not suitable for the weather conditions in Calais. Tents that we distribute are suitable for people going camping or going to a festival, but they are not suitable for several days in a row of heavy rain. That means that very fast the items that we distribute become just unusable. because they're not waterproof anymore. And if the tent's not waterproof, that means that also a blanket or a sleeping bag is going to get wet. And during the day, if it rains again, or if it's cold as it is at the moment, there's no way to dry it. And obviously people cannot sleep with a dry blanket. So that means this item needs to be replaced as well. So all of these reasons are why there is such a high need for tent and bedding in Calais for people on the move. A little bit about our organization. So I'm from La Capuche Mobilisée. We're an organization that started in January this year. And we were created to fill a critical gap in tent and bedding provision following the departure of another organization that was providing those services called Collective Aid that left at the end of last year. And we started immediately after they left so that there would not be like a cut in those services. We also have clothing salvaging and washing activities, and we also distribute other types of NFI, but I'm going to focus on tent and bedding here. The way we distribute is we distribute to men and to unaccompanied minors through an individual request system. We have a distribution phone that people can text, and the number is indicated everywhere that people can look for. And we prioritize by waiting time exclusively. That's because other organizations do prioritize by vulnerability, and they will tell you more about that as well. To give you some numbers that you can see here on your screen, from the moment we started our activity until the end of November, we've distributed a bit more than 2,800 tents for 2 people, a bit more than 2,500 sleeping bags, and tarps we started distributing quite recently, a bit more than 600 so far, but we started only in October. Now that seems like a high number, but we actually had to turn away most of the requests that we received. Just to give you numbers for the month of November, we distributed 362 tents, 323 tarpaulins, 499 sleeping bags, 170 blankets, but actually we had to turn away at least 853 requests. So that's on average 53 requests per day. If you put that into percentage along the year, we have to refuse on average between 60 and 90% of the requests that we receive. Obviously, when I say we refuse, we put people on a waiting list, so they are free to ask again the next day. But the waiting time can go up to 17 days. That's the maximum that we've had actually quite recently. And that happens for many reasons. Lately, obviously it's winter, the need is very high, and there's been very, very few opportunities for people to try and get to the UK, which means that people get stuck here for a longer time. Why we distribute so little compared to the needs that there are, that's because of stock limitation. We do have human capacity, we have logistical capacity, we have a system where we have a budget of 60 tents per week, but we could use the same system to distribute hundreds of tents per week. The only reason we don't is just because we don't have them. So how do we get this stock? We try to get as many donated as possible, obviously. We've been lucky this year that almost 100% of our sleeping bag stock was salvaged at festivals in the summer, and about 30% of our tent stock. But that still leaves about 70% of the tent stock that we do need to purchase. And also, even if we were getting a lot more of this material through salvaging, this is a lot of logistical work, and only with those 30% of tents that on our yearly budget that we got this summer, our teams on the ground spent most of the summer exclusively handling those salvages. So that means going to the salvages, bringing back the stock, handling the stock, sorting through it, storing it, etc., which you can see a nice picture of on the screen. So this is the reason why a lot of our stock needs to be purchased, and this is quite a budget as well. I'm going to pass on now to Lena, who can talk to you about women and families.
Hi everyone, I'm Lena, working for the Refugee Women's Center. Refugee Women's Center has been working in Calais and Dunkirk since 2015 to support women and children on the move living in precarious situations. Its work is based on three pillars: the emergency material aid, the psychological support, and the creation of safe space to reduce the risks of insecurity and gender-based violence. Faced with the near total absence of state-provided accommodation, as the emergency hotline of the 115 is rarely accessible or even non-existent for people on the move, several hundreds of women and children are forced to sleep outdoors in undignified situations. During the last winter, approximately 700 people survived daily in the camps of Calais and Grande-Sainte, despite very low temperature and the infrequent activation of the Plan Grand Froid. RWC is the only organization providing bedding and supplies to women and children on the move specifically. Since the beginning of 2025, the number of women and children are increased sharply. We faced an increase of 60% in Calais, and it's even more significant in Dunkirk, as we saw an increase of 110% for women and 160% for children. This massive surge is exceeding RWC's capacity, and its stocks are no longer sufficient to meet urgent needs, despite our constant work to find more donors and donations. Despite the urgency of the situation on the ground, we are forced to dedicate a considerable amount of time and energy to writing funding application. This reality creates a profound disconnect between the administrative requirements imposed on organizations and the scales of the needs that we face. While hundreds of women and children sleep outdoors without sufficient protection against cold and violence, we must launch numerous fundraising appeals to even hope to gather the minimum resources needed to respond to the emergency. To date, we have still not covered our essential NFI needs for the winter. We are still missing around 300 tents, 200 sleeping bags for adults, and 350 sleeping bags for kids, as well as 400 tarpaulins, which prevent us from adequately meeting the urgent needs of women and children. For example, RWC's limited resources often force women and children to share a single blanket, even if they are four in the family. These systems keeps us in a constant state of flux. The worse the situation becomes, the more funding we have to request, and the further this procedure distances us from the field. As the number of women and children increase, our resources stagnate or even decrease, creating unsustainable pressure on our team and compromising the quality and continuity of our work. Faced with a shortage of supplies, we have been forced to establish particularly strict distribution criteria. These criteria aim to ensure that our limited resources reach the most vulnerable people as a priority. However, they represent difficult choice that in no way reflect to the true extent of the need on the ground. Beyond the weather condition, the inability to provide women with sufficient equipment, whether tents, tarpaulin, or sleeping bag, directly exposes them to greater insecurity. Without basic equipment, they are often forced to find alternative ways to protect themselves in the camp, such as sleeping near strangers, sharing makeshift shelters, or settling in isolated area. This strategy, adopted for lack of better option, significantly increased the risk of assault, harassment, and violence. Insufficient equipment is therefore not just a matter of comfort, it's also a matter of fundamental safety. And I gave the speech to Victor from Utopia.
Thank you, Lena, for passing on the speech to myself. So I'm working with Utopia 56 here in Calais, where Utopia is a national organization in 7 different hubs across the country. Most of our hubs, 5 of them, are focused on miners. And up here in the north, in Calais and in Grande-Sainte, we focused on the border region, and we have two specific shifts, which is our telephone shift and our Maraude Lito. Our telephone shift is each of our two hubs in the north have an emergency hotline, where the number is distributed across anybody in Calais, and they can call us 24/7 for questions or for need of help. We have a team always available behind the phone to try and help them the best. During the day, we redirect to existing organizations, and then at night we can sometimes distribute or help more precisely for specific situations. Our main issue is of housing with the code in Calais and in the north. It's very complicated to spend the night outside, and the solutions that we have are very limited. For minors, for example, the French law states that any miner should be that asks for emergency housing should find a solution 24/7 across France. It's not the case in the north. There are solutions with a mandated organization until 7 p.m. Then until 10 p.m. we can go to the police station to still have access to this organization. And then after 10 p.m. there are no state solutions. We always try and find a state solution first, as they are the ones who have caused this migration problem by closing the border in this way. So after that, after the fact that there's no state solution, we try to find organizational solutions. So currently, and for a few months in winter, MSF has a hotel which is suitable for minors. But unfortunately, this hotel is very limited in space, and so we often have to find other solutions because that's the only organizational solution for minors during the night. Citizen-led solutions can also be an option, not for minors, but more for families, where people offer their homes, for example, for an emergency night to host them. But that's quite rare, and it's very complicated to find new people new hosts who accept this. The last solution is the NFI solution, and that's what we're here to talk about. The fact that we have to give out tents and sometimes clothes to people who are in need in the cold. For men, there's a small house which is an organizational solution, which only has 6 beds, so it's very limited for the 1,000 and more people who are in Calais currently, which 90% are men. And the 115, the state solution, is a non-existing solution since summer 2024. They have not answered a call positively since that time. So most of our beddings and tents go to men in Calais and Grande-Sainte. Our second shift is the Maraude Lito, where we drive along the coast, more south than Boulogne, in the aim of trying to find people who need assistance, who need quick assistance. When they failed an attempt to go to the UK, they can be wet, they can be hungry, they can be tired, and we try and find and help them as quickly as possible. So that's why we drive along the coast and try and meet these groups as fast as possible. for a quick a little bit of data about these failed attempts. During the first 11 months of the year, we received 690 calls for nearly under 18,000 people who are asking for assistance on land after a failed attempt. The numbers are of 343 people calls, for a bit more than 13,000 people who call us when they're still in the sea and are asking for help in the sea. Unfortunately, we can't do much more than call the authorities and try and make sure that the state goes and rescues them. But we try as much as we can to be present when they are brought back at land to again bring our NFI response, which are clothes, emergency blankets, and other warm pieces of clothing. To give you a little bit of data on the things we distribute for the last year, going from September 2024 to August 2025, we distributed in emergency 1,000 tents, about a bit more than 5,000 blankets or sleeping bags, a little under 1,000 tarps, and nearly 10,000 pieces of clothing, mainly trousers and warm jumpers or warm jackets. The NFI is always our main struggle here on the coast, to be able to have enough for the people that we meet. We are forced to buy tents, tarps, blankets, and socks, as they're the hardest to find in donations, and that's where most of our budget goes to. And all the other NFI solutions, the clothes, the trousers, the emergency blankets, they're all from donations, from different types of donations. Some are citizen-led donations, like clothes mainly. The emergency blankets are with a partnership with MSF. We have a few SIM cards and brick phones, which we can get through Emmaüs Connect with Chip or with MSF. But each time these partnerships and the time we spend looking for these donations is considerable, and it takes away from the time that we could be helping directly the people in need in Calais. So it's not a very sustainable solution. It's really counting on the generosity of people. That was and to mention also the number of people that go to the UK. Today in 2025, we're just under 40,000 people who have managed to pass, which is already a lot more than in 2024. The number is on the rise. It has been these few years, and we see that the militarization of the border that forces people to try and cross along the whole coast to Boulogne, and even we've received calls from Dieppe. These solutions don't work. Clearly, people still have the will to pass to the UK. So now I'm gonna keep hold of the mic and talk a little bit about the way we collaborate here in Calais and inside of the Calais appeal. Why it's very important that all our organizations work together and manage to share information and work together. So very quickly to redo a typical day. During the day, the Capuche Mobilisé will distribute tents to the people on their list. RWC will be doing its follow-up and meeting families during the day, and us, Utopia, either we're on the field on the coast looking for people, or answering the telephone from inquiries, and reorienting the people to the specific organization. And then at the end of the day, RWC and us will do a little handover to make sure that if they have encountered any people who need assistance during the night, that we have this information and that we're aware of this. And so during the night, we gather all the information. We're still reachable by anybody. We report and list people, families, and minors that we meet to make sure that the correct organizations have this important information in the morning when they come back to work. And we give them information about all the other organizations and try and help distribute as much as we can. I say as much as we can because, unfortunately, due to the lack of funding, we have very strict criterias. So thankfully for women and children, we're able to use the stock from RWC, the Women's Refugee Council, and so we use that during the night. For men, we're testing for the last few weeks. We were trying to test to give tents out to men who have just arrived in Calais. Unfortunately, the stay of people in Calais can vary from a few days to months or years, and so we've taken the decision to help and give a tent immediately to people who have just arrived. Other people we encourage to find a tent through La Capuche or other means. But it's always very complicated. And for minors, we try and give out tents as much as we can when there's no other solutions. But when they're with an adult, it's very complicated. It's hard to know if they're being manipulated or if there's a risk of the adult having a hold on the child when they're not related. So it really asks a lot of ethical questions for our work, and our volunteers who are on the field have very hard decisions to make. To give a few examples of how we collaboratively work here in Calais on the field, so we have multiple groups on WhatsApp to make sure that the information is passed on along as quickly and as clearly as possible. L'Auberge des Migrants also have creating a map which is going to precisely explain where they meet people when they do wood distributions, which will help us know how the people are spread across Calais, knowing that there are many different campsites. And sometimes it's hard to keep track of where people are. So as I said, when we need NFI from women and children, we're able to use it directly from RWC stock. And on Wednesdays, when RWC don't have the staff to go to Secours Catholique to be present, we offer some of our volunteers to make sure that there's somebody taking all the information from these families at l'accueil de jour, to make sure that information is continuous and that there's no gap in the work that all our organizations do. Also, Utopia 56, as we are a national organization and where we valorize a lot our communication and try and push legislations to move. We have quite a lot of volunteers, and we're sometimes able to lend volunteers to other organizations who would be missing volunteers for a shift or for a week. So that's we're always ready to help out. Same as for a van, we have a new van a new purchase of a van, of course, secondhand. But we always share it with the organizations in the Calais appeal if they need to go pick up some stock from different places along the coast or in Belgium, not too far. It happens regularly that we help ourselves out with this. Some of our big work is to collect data to be able to communicate and to try and change the legislation, as I just said. And one of our legal victories is the Ressourcerie, which is a state organized place where they distribute tents and blankets, which were collected after evictions. So you might have spotted that I said a legal victory, because on paper this is a victory, and before during evictions they would just tear up tents and throw them all in the bin. Today that's not the case anymore. Legally they have been obliged to give back these tents and beddings that are taken. Unfortunately, it's more of a legal victory than anything else, because the place that they decided to give back these tents, La Ressourcerie, is very far from the city center. You have to take a bus, at least 10 minutes of bus, and then 20 minutes of walking. So it's very isolated. Accompanied to the fact that nobody knows that it exists. If we aren't here to spread the word, that then no state actors communicate on the fact that that's an option for them. And as the NFI distributed are coming from evictions, and even today in the eviction process, lots of tents are being either cut or damaged. The quantity over there is very little, and often people go to this very remote place to look for a tent, and there are none. Accompanied to the fact that sometimes they get there and the place is just closed because it's open only 2 hours every day of the week, according to the stock available. So it's most times people show up and it's unfortunately already closed. So it's not a real alternative, and us organizations, non-mandated organizations, have to do the heavy lifting on NFI distribution. I'm going to pass on the mic to Clémence for the next point.
So all three of our organizations are based in the same warehouse that is handled by L'Auberge des Migrants. And we're roughly in the same area as well, with an incoming area right in the middle where we can actually receive all the donations. And especially when we receive shipments that are shared, it makes it much easier to actually divide the stock between the three of our organizations. We also have a shared container outside of the warehouse where we put our more sensitive stock, which is tents, blankets, and sleep bags. And we do meet at least once a month through coordination of L'Auberge des Migrants to specifically discuss the NFI logistics inside the warehouse. So because of all of this, we're all aware of each other's needs list at all times. And it allows for like a very smooth transfer of stock when needed. So for example, like after the summer festivals, us, like Capuche, we were in very big need of tents, but Utopia was good with tents and was more in need of sleeping bags. And then when we did receive a shipment from a summer festival, it was just very easy to just divide the stock after a simple conversation. Yeah, what we also do is that we lend each other stock when needed, which we did, for example, in the spring when we were waiting for a shipment of tents that was taking a bit longer to arrive. And to ensure that we wouldn't have to actually reduce our distribution or cut our distribution, Utopia was able to lend us a stock of tents that we gave them back after we received the shipment. And probably we're going to do that again in a few months as well, because shipments take a long time to arrive. Yeah, and that's that about the warehouse, and I'm going to pass on to Louis.
Hi, so I wanted to talk briefly about the NFI Common Pot. This is an initiative created by Calais Appeal in 2024. All of the organisations present today, we spoke together, and of course we're very conscious that we're all organisations who are working to provide tents, bedding and other NFI to similar groups of people, slightly different demographics, slightly different methods of distribution, but essentially the same focus. And we wanted to provide a way that foundations and other donors could give to a collective pot, which could then be used to buy tents and sleeping bags and clothing for any of these member organizations. And this has been an initiative that's been quite successful. It's enabled some larger donors to be able to give some quite significant sums. And over the last year and a half, we've received more than 25,000 euros through this route, which has made a big difference to our work. Although, of course, as you've heard from everyone speaking today, we still have vastly insufficient amounts of stock. I'm now going to pass the microphone to Clémence, who's going to talk a little bit about the emergency response initiative.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, a last part to tell you a bit more about like collaboration and how we actually collaborate with each other, but also with other organizations. So we do collaborate on emergency response with other actors, where there's the three of us, but also human rights observers who are the ones witnessing evictions. And when there's going to be a big eviction event, they are the first on site who are able to actually have the first information about the number of items that were seized or the number of people that got evicted, have a first contact with people and are able to actually connect us with them so we can organize an emergency response. But also we collaborate with Care for Calais, who is another organization that's working from a separate warehouse, also working on NFI, and they do have tents and bedding for emergency situation. And this work has been working happening informally for quite a while already, but in the beginning of the year we saw a need to actually formalize it so that we could ensure a quicker response. And usually what we do is to try and respond on the day when there's an emergency or the next day. What we do consider an emergency is obviously larger evictions, so not the ones that happen every 48 hours, but maybe larger ones that either concern a higher number of people or a bigger evictions where most of the material is seized, which basically suddenly creates a very, very high need for material. But also a couple of weeks ago, actually, we did trigger this protocol for something we did consider an emergency, which is that the waiting time to get a tent from La Capuche was actually at an all-time high. We reached 17 days of waiting, which means that people from the first day they request a tent, which might not be the first day they arrive in Calais, because sometimes they also need some time to actually be able to meet someone who's going to give them our phone number. From the first day they would register, they would have to wait up to 17 days to actually get a tent. And we know that in many cases, they don't have any other solution than this. And it was only getting higher and higher. We had dozens and dozens of requests every day, and it was not going down. So basically, we saw this as an emergency, and this is why, added to a bigger eviction that happened the day before, we decided to actually trigger this protocol. And what we do is that with all those actors involved, then we try to see who's available for what, because it then it depends like who has capacity for for what, and who's going to be able to organize the distribution, who's going to be able to provide vehicles, who's going to be able to provide volunteers, who's going to be able to provide the stock, which kind of stock, etc. So the one that we did 2 weeks ago, the easiest was for La Capuche to organize it, which is what we did. And then through the discussion with Care for Calais, who didn't have logistical capacity that day, they were able to actually give us back some stock of tent afterwards, so that it would not actually, we would not have to go through our stock of tent that massively. And we did 3 separate distributions, 2 on a Friday, 1 on a Monday, and of about 130 tents and the double amount of sleeping bags, and also tarpaulins, which brought our waiting list down to only 7 days, which is still massive, but this is what the demand is at the moment. And basically, this system is like, the point of this is to be able to see very quickly who's able to do what and to respond as fast as possible and in the most efficient way possible. Also trying to make it more fair to see who's able to respond this time, but maybe someone else is able to respond this time, also in terms of stock, etc. And we can see that this is actually a lot more efficient when we have more actors who are able to collaborate on this than to work separately, obviously. And then I'm pass back to Louis.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to make a few last remarks to bring this webinar to a close. I think firstly, it's really important that we just take a second to go beyond all of the stats and the big numbers and the details of how we operate, and think a little bit about the actual severity of everything we're talking about. Every year we're supporting around 25,000 people. All of these people will be spending many nights in tents. If you're in Calais through winter, you're going to experience many nights that drop below 0. This is a huge human issue, and it's a political issue as well, of course, because the causes are most certainly political. And I think it's really important to consider exactly what this means to be waiting 1 week or 2 weeks for a tent in a situation like this. Of course, there is a lot of community resilience. There's a lot of people helping each other, people sharing tents, people organizing between themselves to find some sort of solution. But this is actually something that is it's a huge catastrophe, in fact. The fact of the matter is that we just don't have the capacity to support everyone that we should be able to support. It's really difficult to get exact statistics on exactly how many more tents we'd need every year, or how many more sleeping bags we'd need every year to be able to give a sort of dignified service. However, we believe it's around double the capacity that we currently have. In these webinars, and we do these webinars every 3 months, focusing on different issues facing people on the move in Calais. In these webinars, we don't normally make a direct call for support, because the idea is that they're factual, and we're giving information to people who support us. But I think that given the gravity of this situation, it's really important that we say that we do need people's support here. We are in urgent need of people's support, and we're in urgent need of people mobilizing the networks around them, whether that's community organizations, whether that's people on a local level who are able to make collections and bring donations to us in Calais, but also mobilizing networks of foundations, mobilizing networks of philanthropists, mobilizing all of the networks around us who will be able to give support for our work and support for people on the move in Calais who have such limited access to shelter and who endure human rights violations on a daily basis. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We're always happy to share more information. An email you can reach us at is funding@calaisappeal.org. And I think at that point there, we'll bring this part of the presentation to a close and open up to any questions if anyone has any. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to us today.